Good morning, everyone. Christ's use of hate in today's gospel hopefully caused our ears to perk up a little bit. If we don't hate people, we can't be his disciple, he says. This hopefully strikes us as odd, considering who says it, and keeping in mind the totality of the gospel, considering Christ who told us to love God and love our neighbor as ourselves, to love your enemies, to pray for those who persecute you. It should strike us as a little odd that he's telling us to hate people today, specifically family members. Now, I want to kind of dispel any thoughts that might be entering your head. This does not mean we get permission or license to go out and start hating people, especially if there's a gridlock in the parking lot or something. It's just, bear with me. What this phrase does mean is simply this, though. Our love of family, of mother, father, spouse, children, brother and sister, and even love of our own life, must come second to our love of God. To put it another way, we must do this whole Christianity thing wholeheartedly. A house divided against itself cannot stand. We cannot serve two masters. We cannot have half a heart for the things of this world and half a heart for God. He wants our whole heart. Because that's what it means to be a disciple. And discipleship, my brothers and sisters, is costly. Sometimes discipleship costs us our families, like it did with St. Thomas More, the great English martyr, who stood up to King Henry VIII, whose wife and child came to try to get him to turn against God. And when he refused his wife and his child, he was put to death. Sometimes it costs us our lives, like it did for the apostles and the various martyrs throughout history. Sometimes it costs us our freedom, like it did with St. Paul in the second reading today. Sometimes it will cost us our job, promotion. Other times it might be sacrificing social status because we refuse to betray our belief in Jesus Christ. Now, hopefully this doesn't scare you away from being disciples. But this is why Christ talks about the person building a tower and counting the cost, and the king going to war and checking to see if he can win. Christ wants disciples who know the cost of discipleship. He wants disciples who know that it might mean giving up our very lives for him, giving up everything for him. Being a follower of Christ isn't just a once-a-week Sunday obligation. He demands the entirety of who we are, every moment of our very lives. He wants us to know, love, and serve him with our very being, just as he in turn knows and loves us with the entirety of who he is. The demands of the gospel can be daunting, but I do want to share some good news about it before I've completely scared you off. God never puts an obstacle in front of us that he hasn't prepared us for. All of the saints throughout history who have done the great, grand, heroic acts of virtue were all prepared for these well beforehand. The saint who goes and gives his life for God 20 years before probably would have said no. But he would have said yes to 5 minutes of prayer at night, going to Mass on Sunday, going out and visiting the poor and the sick and the homebound, taking food and whatever is necessary for the people of God. It's a small, slow buildup of ability and progress in the spiritual life, of grace in our own life. And we slowly come to the Lord closer and closer. It's as if God gives us little battles early on and bigger ones as we're more and more capable. Now this next little bit, I do want to mention I wrote for the 5:30 teen mass tonight, so if it doesn't meet with your experiences, that's fine, don't worry. This is kind of like in video games. When you first start out, you get various bad guys that with a little bit of effort, you are equipped to defeat. And as you progress through the game, the battles and the bad guys both become much more difficult to conquer, to defeat. but the abilities you have gained throughout that time of playing, the abilities, the new skills that you've developed through that time of playing that game, make it so that it's just requires a little bit of more effort than before to actually defeat the bigger bosses, the bigger monsters, the bigger, scarier battles. And so, with a little bit more effort, we are victorious. But unlike video games, our victory in the spiritual life has an eternal component to it. Sometimes much greater, something much greater and worth much more than everything we possess, worth much more than our families, our jobs, our social standings, because the reward that we get is Christ himself. My brothers and sisters, today Christ is calling us to deeper, more intimate discipleship, a discipleship that is costly. He calls us to give our entire lives to him. So will we love God more than family? Will we count and know the cost before building the tower and going to war? And will we take up our cross and follow him? Because the battles ahead are great, but the victory is even greater, because the Lord is God himself.